Emily said softly. I know it hurts. Her voice steady even as anger churned beneath her ribs. This was the third time in less than 2 months. The third time Lisa had shown up after hours with the same worn-out explanations, slipping in the bathroom, bumping into a door, falling down the stairs. But I need you to stay still so I can document this injury. Lisa's hand shot up, gripping Emily's wrist with sudden strength that made her pause. No, don't take pictures, please. Lisa. Emily set the cold pack aside and met the young woman's terrified eyes. I'm your doctor. These photos stay in your medical record. That's all. In case you ever need them. Later. Lisa's lower lip trembled. At 25 years old, she should have been glowing with youth, overflowing with possibility. Instead, her pale skin was scattered with dark bruises blooming like poisonous flowers. One eye was swollen nearly shut. In her initial exam, Emily had already identified at least 2 fractured ribs, along with deep bruising along the hips and a fresh split at the corner of her mouth. He'll know, Lisa whispered, her voice so small it barely existed. Brian always knows everything. He won't know, Emily said gently, tightening her hold on the young woman's hand. I promise you. But you deserve proof. You deserve choices. It took a long moment before Lisa gave the smallest nod. Emily reached for her phone with careful hands, though her heart felt unbearably heavy. She had seen many cases of abuse in her career, but something about Lisa made it impossible to look away. Maybe it was the way she hid her pain, or how she didn't beg or dramatize, only endured, quietly, as if it were the only life she knew. But Emily refused to accept that this was normal, not in her clinic, not while she could still do something. What Emily didn't know, couldn't know, was that Brian Whitman was tracking his wife's every step. A locator device no larger than a fingertip was tucked inside the lining of Lisa's purse, quietly sending her location straight to his phone. And less than a 10-minute drive from the clinic, Brian's hands, red and mottled with rage, were clenched around the steering wheel as the minutes fed fuel into the wildfire building inside him. Emily also didn't know that on the top floor, inside a dimly lit office filled with the hush of high-end security systems, another man was watching her through a bank of cameras. Nathan Cross, the owner of the building and half the surrounding block, sat motionless in a leather chair, his cool gray eyes following Emily's movements as if cataloging each small gesture. Not out of suspicion, but because he had been aware of her from the day she moved her practice here 3 months ago, from the moment she smiled at the doorman and said thank you, while most tenants only issued commands. Nathan had seen many faces on his cameras, false, greedy, dangerous. But Emily was different. And tonight, when he saw Brian pacing outside the 4th-floor clinic, checking his phone with restless, jittery hands, something primal inside Nathan snapped awake in warning. He rose, buttoned his coat with swift, decisive movements, and said calmly, "Bring the car around," because something told him this night would not end quietly. If you're still listening and this story has touched something in your heart, take a moment to subscribe to our channel. Like and share this video, so we can continue bringing you stories filled with emotion each and every day. And if you don't mind, would you tell me where you're watching from? Leave a comment below and let us know which corner of the world this story has reached. We truly appreciate every word you share. Emily lifted Lisa's bruised arm gently, the cold clinic lights reflecting off the mottled palette of fading blues and purples mixed with fresh, angry reds. She kept her tone steady, though each word echoed against the tightness coiling in her chest. I won't send these to anyone, Lisa. They stay in your file. If one day you want to press charges, or you need to protect yourself, you'll need evidence. Lisa shook her head, lips trembling. He'll know, Emily exhaled slowly, fighting down the surge of rage rising in her throat. He can't know unless you tell him. I'm not sharing anything with anyone. You have a right to privacy, a right to safety. Lisa lowered her face, rain-damp strands of blonde hair falling forward to shield the fear in her eyes. Nothing is private with him. He sees everything. Messages, appointments, even my bank account. The phone is his, the purse is his. Everything in my life belongs to him. Her voice cracked on the last word, as if she'd brushed against a truth so painful it made her flinch inward. Emily gently untangled Lisa's fingers from her wrist and stepped back, her gaze soft but firm. Then, I'll use the clinic's camera, not the phone. She pointed toward a medical cabinet where a simple clinical camera was stored. No network connection, no cloud backup. No one can track it. I promise, Lisa said nothing, only wrapped her bruised arms around herself as if trying to protect whatever parts of her body were still untouched by pain. She sat curled on the exam table like a child searching for the smallest corner to disappear into. Emily approached slowly, lowering herself so they were eye level. You don't have to decide anything today. You don't have to speak or act before you're ready. But if tomorrow you decide you want out, if you're ever blamed, or if you end up in a hospital bed, these photos might be the only voice you have. Lisa looked up at her, eyes swollen and glistening. I tried, a few times, but every time I left, he found me. I went to my mom's, he showed up there. I stayed with a friend, he waited outside. I don't have anywhere to come. Go. The words made something deep inside Emily twist painfully. Not only because of Lisa's suffering, but because it was a story she'd heard too many times from too many women trapped in the same invisible cage. And what infuriated her most was the system's helplessness. Police demanded proof, courts demanded documentation, and victims were left with nothing but fading bruises and tears. Let me help you, Emily said, her voice firmer now, almost pleading. Let me take these photos. If you never use them, they stay in your file. But if you ever need them, they could be the only thing that stands on your side. Lisa held her gaze for a long, unblinking moment, then finally nodded. Emily retrieved the camera, adjusting the lens and lighting with slow, deliberate care, always gentle, always respectful, never invasive. But the moment she lifted the camera, Lisa flinched and curled inward, covering her face. He'll kill me if he finds out. Emily lowered the device and sat beside her again. He won't find out, and he won't touch you again, not when you have me and the truth and evidence. In the heavy silence that followed, the sound of rain against the windows grew sharper. At last, Lisa's shoulders relaxed, her hands lowering from her face, giving Emily permission to document the cruel marks someone would one day have to answer for. With each click of the shutter, Emily felt a small part of her fury flash through the camera, as if she were doing something right in a world that so often failed the women who needed it most. But while she carefully captured each angle, she had no idea that just a few blocks away, Brian was tearing through the rain, eyes locked on the tiny blinking red dot on his screen, the signal telling him exactly where Lisa was. And he was on his way. On the rain-soaked street, the black SUV shot forward through the downpour like an arrow slicing the wind. The headlights swept across shimmering puddles, their reflections flickering over Brian Whitman's tense, rigid face. His hands strangled the steering wheel, knuckles bone-white, eyes locked on the glowing phone screen where a single red dot pulsed steadily. The GPS coordinates refreshed again and again, no more than 2 blocks away. He didn't need the name of the location. He had known it for years. The community clinic where his wife occasionally claimed she needed to check her blood pressure or renew a prescription. He used to snort when she fed him those excuses. He knew she was trying to slip away, trying to lie, trying to inch out of his control. He felt it in her eyes, in the way she hid her phone when he walked into a room, in how her voice grew smaller every time she mentioned Dr. Emily Carter. Every little action was an act of betrayal. And he never tolerated betrayal, not from the woman he had paid handsomely to make his. His eyes burned as the red dot stopped moving. She was there. Nearing the intersection, he turned the radio up slightly, a reflex meant to cage the anger pulsing through him. Soft, dreamy jazz floated out, completely at odds with the storm inside him. He shut it off instantly, as if the calmness itself made him unravel further. Only one thought remained in his mind. Bring Lisa home. Bring her back to where she belonged. And anyone who stepped between them, doctor or saint, would pay for it. Several floors above the clinic, inside a soundproof office lined with glass walls and minimalist gray interiors, Nathan Cross sat before a row of security monitors, his cool gray eyes fixed on the camera feed from the 4th floor. A man had appeared in the hallway, his dark suit soaked from the rain, his movements tight and restless as he paced in front of the clinic door like a wounded predator. Nathan had noticed him minutes earlier, when he stepped off the elevator without entering any apartment. This hallway was always quiet, never a place for strangers, and the anxious tension in the man's stride did not belong to someone who was lost. When he pulled out his phone and checked it repeatedly, Nathan understood. This was no visitor. This was a problem. The name that flashed across the facial recognition software sealed the conclusion. Brian Whitman. Nathan had heard it before. Not in the world of finance. not in the media, but in the brief security reports he had quietly requested ever since Emily Carter moved her small clinic into his building. They were not friends. They had exchanged little more than polite greetings. But Nathan had taken notice the very first day she walked through the lobby, clutching her folder of patient charts, smiling at the doorman. No one smiled here. They issued orders, but she was different. Not because of her gentle brown eyes or her quiet beauty, but because her presence carried a weight, a steadiness, something that made a person pause and care. And Nathan, a man who had built an empire on control and ruthless precision, found himself watching her more often than he cared to admit. He knew about Brian, about the rumors, the failed police reports Lisa had tried to file, the lack of witnesses, the bruises no one dared name. And now the man stood at Emily's door. In Nathan's building. Nathan rose, fastening his coat with slow, deliberate movements. He pressed a button on his phone. Nikolai's voice came through the earpiece almost instantly. "Is something wrong, boss?" "Whitman is on the 4th floor. She's working after hours. She is not alone. Do you want me to come down?" "No," Nathan said sharply, without hesitation. "I'll handle it myself. Bring the car around. I need to be there in 3 minutes." He looked at the screen one last time. Brian had stopped now, standing directly in front of the clinic door, fists clenched tight, rage carved into every line of his face, a storm waiting to explode. But Nathan had seen bigger storms, and he always knew how to extinguish them, especially when they dared erupt on his territory. The clinic door swung open just as the last echo of Brian's footsteps faded down the hallway. Emily stepped out, her eyes meeting Nathan's tall, broad frame blocking part of the light overhead, his hands in his coat pockets, his presence filling the hallway like something immovable. His gaze was cold, but when it landed on her, it softened just slightly as if a thick layer of frost had been brushed aside for a breath. Emily held the door halfway open, not stepping fully out, just enough to shield the room behind her. Her voice was quiet but taut. "Is he gone?" Nathan nodded once, measured and calm. "I made sure he won't be back tonight, but—" He paused, studying her. "I can't promise that for tomorrow, or the day after." Emily tightened her grip on the doorframe, her back brushing against it. She looked at Nathan as if trying to decipher who he was or what he represented. Danger? Safety? She wasn't sure. She only knew Lisa was still inside, trembling, bruised, curled up on the exam table like she was bracing for another blow. And that thought dragged Emily firmly back into the moment. "Thank you," she murmured. "For showing up." Nathan shrugged, calm but calculating. "I'm not the type to meddle in other people's affairs, but this is my building, and I don't tolerate violence here, especially against someone who can't defend herself." Emily studied him, eyes wary. "What are you planning to do?" "Get you both away from him, at least for tonight." Nathan pulled out his phone, opened his contacts, but didn't dial yet. Instead, he looked at her again. "I have a place outside the city, about 30 minutes from downtown. Secluded, guarded. No one knows about it except my people. You and Lisa can stay there for now, until I'm sure Brian is no longer an immediate threat." "Do you expect me to trust you?" Emily asked, her suspicion unhidden. "I don't take protection. Offers from men I know nothing about except their name. My name is Nathan Cross. I own this building and several others. And I have something the law doesn't, the ability to act now." He let the words settle. "You're a smart woman, doctor. You know exactly what the police will do if Lisa files a report tomorrow. Make notes, set appointments, and tell her to avoid confrontation. But when the abuser has money and connections, that advice evaporates into thin air." Emily didn't respond. She knew he was right. New part of her wanted to agree for Lisa, for safety she herself could not guarantee, but instinct clawed at her too. This man came from a world she didn't understand, didn't belong in. A world where words were commands, and silence could be more dangerous than gunfire. "I'm going with her," she said finally, after a long pause. "I need to make sure Lisa is cared for. And I need to see this place myself, to know it's real and not just a gilded cage." A flicker of surprise crossed Nathan's eyes, quickly replaced by respect. "Very well. The car is waiting downstairs. I'll have 2 rooms prepared. One for Lisa, one for you. I'll get my medical bag." Emily turned, but before closing the door, she looked at him again. "I don't know who you really are, Nathan Cross. But if you're lying, If you use this situation for anything other than helping her, her voice dropped, steady and unwavering. I will be the one who makes you regret it. Nathan dipped his head, no trace of mockery. I hope you do, if that ever becomes necessary. Emily turned to help Lisa stand up, still shaking. Lisa instinctively reached for her worn leather purse and her phone lying on the exam table. Leave it, Nathan said sharply, his voice cutting through the room like a command. Lisa froze, clutching the strap. But my phone. You don't need it. That's how he found you. Nathan stepped partially into the room, his eyes locking onto the purse. The lining of the bag, or the phone itself. He's tracking a signal, not you. If you take it, he follows us to the safe house. Emily realized instantly that he was right. She gently pulled the purse from Lisa's grip. Nathan is right, Lisa. We have to cut the cord. Leave them right there on the table, Nathan added, his gaze cold and calculating. Let him see the dot on his screen stay right here. Let him think you're still inside waiting for him while we disappear. Lisa's hands trembled, but she let the bag drop back onto the table with a heavy thud. It was the first physical weight she had let go of in years. When the door finally shut behind them, locking the tracking device inside the empty clinic, Nathan glanced down at his phone and pressed a button. Nikolai, bring the car around. Destination, the Haven, 2 guests, full security protocols. He looked once more at the empty hallway, where the air still carried the faint chill of danger that had just passed. This time, he wasn't only protecting his property, he was protecting something more. Something he wasn't ready to name. The rain still had not stopped when the black SUV quietly pulled out of the building's underground garage, gliding through the dim, sparsely lit streets. Inside the car, no one spoke. Lisa sat curled in the back seat beneath the coat Emily had wrapped around her, her eyes fixed on the rain-streaked window as if searching for some invisible escape route in the night. Emily sat in the passenger seat, hands resting on her lap, stealing glances at Nathan behind the wheel. Everything had happened too fast, too silently, too mysteriously for her to feel at ease. She barely knew this man knew nothing beyond his name and the cold, weighty presence he carried with him. He didn't offer explanations, didn't try to persuade. He said only what needed to be said and acted in a way that made the world around him fall into an unnerving stillness. And that, more than anything, made Emily wary. The quieter a man was, the more dangerous he often proved to be. She had seen every kind of man in the emergency room, bullies, charmers, men who faked concern, but Nathan was different. He wasn't pretending, and that only made him harder to read. The car turned onto a deserted road lined with rain-soaked trees. Through the automated iron gate, a house emerged in the darkness like a modern fortress. 2 stories tall, bulletproof glass, motion-sensing lights blooming to life one by one as the tires rolled past. The front door opened just as the car stopped. A tall man dressed in black waiting with a slight nod at Nathan before silently leading the way inside. Nathan didn't need to give orders. Everything had already been prepared. Emily guided Lisa into the foyer, where warm lighting washed over gray walls and polished dark wood floors. There was the faint scent of cedar, and the stillness of a luxury retreat sealed off from the world. Lisa stumbled from exhaustion, her fearful eyes darting from corner to corner, as if she were being delivered into captivity rather than safety. Emily tightened her grip and whispered, "It's only temporary. You're safe now." But as her gaze swept the interior, subtle cameras at the ceiling corners, nearly invisible layers of security behind each window, an unease curled deep in her chest. This wasn't just a house. It was a place built to protect someone, or to contain them. Nathan led them up the stairs, down a long hallway toward 2 adjacent bedrooms. He opened the first door. "This room is for Lisa. There are medications, clean clothes, a private bathroom, everything she might need." Then he opened the door across the hall. "This one is for you. If you prefer to stay with her, you can switch. It's your call." Emily nodded, guiding Lisa into the first room. She eased the young woman onto the bed, removed her shoes, brought her water, and checked her. Injuries again. Lisa said nothing during the entire process, her eyes hollow, her body flinching at every faint sound from the hallway. When she finally fell asleep from sheer exhaustion, Emily stepped out, closing the door quietly. Nathan was still in the hallway, arms folded. "I need to know this place is truly safe," she said plainly. No one knows we're here? No nosy staff or curious neighbors? No one, Nathan answered. Only my people. They don't talk, they don't ask questions, and they're loyal without exception. Out of fear or money? Emily asked, refusing to look away. Nathan gave a faint smile, not amused, but almost impressed, as if she had just asked a question most people never dared to ask him. Because I saved their lives, and because they know that if they ever betrayed me, there wouldn't be anywhere left for them to hide. Emily clenched her hands, keeping her spine straight. I'm not someone who trusts easily. You know that. I don't need you to trust me tonight. Nathan stepped closer, stopping just an arm's length away. I only need you to recognize one thing. I am on your side. And if that's enough to keep both of you alive until morning, then the rest can wait. Emily didn't respond. She couldn't read him, but she also couldn't deny the single undeniable truth. He had done what the legal system could not. And Lisa, at last, was asleep behind a locked door, with no threat of waking up to fists or terror. For tonight, that was enough for Emily to push her doubt aside. Only tonight. The next morning, dim sunlight filtered through the heavy curtains of the guest room, but Lisa was still asleep. Emily had risen early, unable to rest. She spent a few minutes at the window overlooking the silent courtyard behind the estate. The quiet was almost unsettling, no cars, no voices, only the hush of a place cut off from the world. But inside her mind, everything churned. She checked her medical bag, splashed cold water on her face, then went to Lisa's room. The young woman still slept, curled into a tight ball in the center of the wide bed. Emily gently woke her, using the softest voice she could manage. After a few minutes, Lisa's bruised eyes opened. Where are we? Her voice rasped. A safe place. You need rest, but I have to check your injuries first. Lisa didn't answer but didn't resist. Emily helped her sit up, propping her with pillows. In the morning light, the bruises looked even worse. The swelling around her left eye had spread down her cheek, turning it a deep, sickened purple. When Emily pressed lightly along her ribs, Lisa recoiled in pain. I thought it was just bruising, Lisa whispered. It isn't, Emily said firmly. I'm almost certain you have fractured ribs 2 or 3, maybe more. You need an X-ray, but I'm sure it's not just a bruise. Lisa lowered her head, her hands twisting together. He kicked me when I tried to grab my phone. I didn't even get the chance to react. Emily paused, forcing her own emotions into stillness. She was used to injuries, but what unsettled her most was the emptiness in Lisa's eyes, the quiet resignation she had seen too often in women after years of abuse. Lisa, you can file a report. You have photos, medical documentation. This is your chance to start over. Lisa let out a soft, bitter laugh, barely more than a breath. Do you think the police will care? I tried. 3 times. The first time they said there wasn't enough evidence. The second time they said the neighbors didn't hear anything. The third time one of Brian's friends was on the response team. They came, talked for 5 minutes, and told me to maintain harmony in the household. After that, he beat me worse for embarrassing him in front of the law. Emily's fists tightened, but her voice stayed even. This time is different. You have proof. You have medical reports. You have me. And you have Nathan. The name made Lisa flinch. Who is he? What kind of man has a place like this to hide people in? I'm afraid of him. I don't know exactly, Emily admitted. I've never met anyone like him, but last night without him, I don't know if we would still be safe. Lisa stared at her hands. I don't know who I can trust anymore. Emily rested a hand on her shoulder, steady and warm. Then start by trusting yourself. You deserve to live without fear. A soft knock echoed at the door. When Emily opened it, a man in black handed her a paper bag and an envelope. Breakfast. And documents. He said nothing more, bowed his head, and left. Emily set the bag on the table and opened the envelope. Inside were 3 sheets, a duplicate of the medical notes she'd made the night before, a list of attorneys specializing in domestic abuse cases in the state of Minnesota, and a brief handwritten line. I have already had someone check Brian's legal standing. If you need additional evidence gathered, simply tell me. No signature, only clean, controlled handwriting. Emily read the line again, folded the papers, and looked at Lisa sitting small and silent on the bed. Maybe this time things truly could be different, but if so, the cost would not be small. When Emily stepped out of Lisa's room, the envelope still clenched in her hand, she saw Nathan standing at the far end of the hallway, leaning against the glass railing, his gaze fixed on the garden below as if weighing something heavy. Morning light cut across his features, sharpening their chiseled severity. Hearing her footsteps, he turned, unsurprised to see her. "You read them?" Emily nodded. "I don't know where you got those documents, but I'll admit, they're useful." Nathan didn't speak right away. Instead, he reached into his coat and handed her another thin file. "This may make you feel grateful or make you want to walk straight back into the city, but you have the right to know." Emily opened it, eyes skimming over clear print. Financial reports, loan records, transfers between multiple unidentified accounts, and at the end, an internal surveillance memo. She looked up, suspicion sharp. "Brian owes money to an unofficial group." Nathan nodded. "A small branch of a crew based in Detroit, recently expanding into Minneapolis. Mainly gambling, loan sharking, human trafficking." Emily felt the blood drain from her face. "He borrowed from them?" "Nearly 300,000, Nathan said slowly. "He gambled most of it, threw some into junk stocks, and the rest my guess is he used to maintain appearances. But the amount isn't the real problem. The deadline passed nearly 2 weeks ago, and a man like Brian has nothing to offer as collateral." Emily gripped the file. "Except his wife." Nathan held her gaze without blinking. "Exactly. In that world, if you cannot pay, they take what you have. Your house, your car, or a person." "You mean?" Emily's voice cracked. "They would. Lisa is young, pretty, and vulnerable. A perfect target for men who treat human beings as merchandise." Emily took a step back, as if the truth had physically knocked the breath from her. She turned away, inhaling deeply to hold back the surge of rage and despair. "How long have you known this?" "I suspected something when I saw him pacing the 4th-floor hallway with that wild look in his eyes. But I confirmed it early this morning. My men finished gathering and verifying the information." "And you didn't tell me immediately?" Emily snapped, turning sharply. "You had enough to face already. I wanted you to see her safe before adding more weight. It is not your decision how much I can carry." Their eyes locked, unblinking, tension drawn tight between them. After several seconds, Nathan inclined his head. "You're right. Next time, I'll tell you immediately." Emily stood still for a moment, staring at the file. "If those men find Lisa—" "They won't," Nathan said, cutting her off, his voice dropping to something darker. "I've already sent word to their leader. A meeting has been arranged for tonight. They know who I am, and they know I'm coming to settle this." Emily froze, snapping her head toward him. "Resolve it? What does that even mean?" "It means I am going to buy that debt," Nathan said slowly, each word firm and deliberate. 300,000. In cash, in exchange for Lisa's permanent freedom. I will make sure her name is erased from their books right in front of me. "You cannot be serious," Emily breathed, disbelief flooding her voice. "That is an enormous amount of money, and you plan to meet human traffickers alone? I don't need permission. I need results." Nathan stepped closer, his tone steady but edged with something weightier. "I have lived long enough to know there are places the law cannot reach. And if you want to protect someone, sometimes you have to speak in the language your enemies understand." Emily felt her chest tighten until she could barely breathe. She didn't know whether to be grateful or terrified of the man standing before her. He was willing to walk straight into the wolves' den to buy Lisa's freedom. But how? And at what future cost? Yet when she thought of Lisa sleeping peacefully in the room behind her, perhaps for the first time in years, she realized that tonight the young woman finally had a chance to stop being prey. Even if it meant Nathan slipping back into the shadows he clearly knew too well, and that truth alone made Emily's breath catch. She stood on the balcony of the 2nd floor of the Haven, arms crossed tightly over her chest as if holding herself together. The night sky hung low and heavy, a deep gray occasionally sliced apart by distant flashes of lightning. She heard his familiar footsteps behind her but didn't turn. Nathan stopped a few steps away, his gaze fixed on her rigid back. When she didn't speak, he broke the silence. "I know you're angry." "Angry?" Emily turned, her voice icy. You just negotiated with human traffickers, handed over money as if you were buying a car, and you think I'm merely angry? I saved her, Emily. Nathan's response was slow, each word measured so as not to escalate the fire already burning. No, you paid off devils so they would not touch her. You didn't eliminate the evil, Nathan. You just redirected it to someone else. And you think the police could have done better? Nathan took one step forward, his tone low and cutting. Issue a restraining order? Put her on a witness protection waitlist? While all that happens, Lisa would vanish without a trace. I refuse to watch the system fail her again. So, instead you replace it with the law of the jungle? Emily felt something break in her throat. Violence, secret deals, buying people like commodities. I used the language those men understand. If that is wrong to you, I won't argue. But I do not regret it. Nathan stood directly in front of her now, eyes unflinching. I have seen far too many innocent people pay the price because they believed in justice. I will not let Lisa be one of them. Emily's fists tightened until her nails cut into her palms. She looked at him with a mix of fury and pain, a deep, burning ache, not only because he was wrong, but because he was also right. You think I haven't seen the system fail? I've watched women go back to their abusers because there was nowhere else to go, because the law didn't protect them. But I still believe in principles, in laws. If I abandon that, what makes me any different from you? You are nothing like me, Emily. You are light. And I am someone who has lived in the dark long enough to know that sometimes the only thing that keeps demons underground is a bigger demon. The words pulled them both into silence. The anger dissolved into an unspoken ache between them. A breeze stirred, sweeping Emily's hair across her face. Nathan instinctively reached to brush the strands back but stopped halfway, fingers hovering near her cheek. Emily looked at him, conflict softening the edge of her gaze. Why do you care about me this much? Nathan didn't answer right away. He studied her as if weighing whether the truth was too dangerous to speak. Then his voice dropped, deep and disarmingly sincere, sending a tremor through her chest. Because you didn't look at me like a monster. Not at first. Because you remind me that there are still things worth protecting, not with fists, but with a heart. Emily's throat tightened. She didn't know whether to be moved or afraid. Amidst danger and shadows, he was the one thing that made her feel strangely safe, if only for a fleeting moment. I don't know if I can trust you, Nathan. Everything about you feels like stepping into fog. You don't need to trust me right now. But don't deny your own feelings just because they scare you. Nathan stepped closer, so near she could feel the warmth of him through the cool night air. I am not perfect. I am not good. But if you allow me, I will stand between you and anything that tries to hurt you. Emily didn't step back. She didn't step forward either. She simply stood there, suspended between reason and something softer, warmer. And for once, she didn't push that feeling away. Without another word, they turned toward the garden below, where soft lights glowed in the damp night. Silence stretched, but something had shifted. A seed planted, not trust yet, not love, but the beginning of both. Dinner was set on the long wooden table in the Haven's spacious kitchen, warm golden light softening the sharp edges of the world beyond. Emily sat at the head of the table, her hand loosely holding a glass of water she never drank, her eyes following Nathan as he placed the last dish in front of them. Every movement of his was precise, almost meticulous, as if he were trying to show he was capable of more than issuing orders or confronting violence. Lisa had finished eating early and gone upstairs to rest, leaving the kind of quiet Emily wasn't entirely ready for. She glanced at the handmade pasta, the garlic butter bread, the opened bottle of red wine. She sighed softly. Is this supposed to be an apology? Nathan took the seat opposite her, poured wine into her glass, then into his own. I'm not apologizing for protecting her, but I can apologize if I made you feel unsafe. Emily frowned slightly, swirling the wine. I don't know what scares me more. Men like Brian, or the fact that I'm starting to get used to the way you handle things. Nathan gave a faint smile, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. Maybe both, but not every method I use is violent. A quiet dinner can be another kind of shelter, if it helps you feel seen. She lifted her gaze to him. You think you can protect me by making me trust you? He took a moment before speaking, eyes steady on hers. I'm not asking for your trust tonight. I only want you to understand that I'm not leaving. Whether you believe in me or doubt me, whether you push me away or let me stay, I'm here. Sometimes the most reliable promise is simply showing up and not disappearing. Something inside her chest softened, melting like thin ice under warmth. Her shoulders eased. I'm not someone who trusts easily. I've lost everything before because I trusted the wrong person. Nathan nodded, his expression gentler than she'd ever seen. So have I. Maybe that's why we can recognize honesty when we see it. Silence settled over them, not heavy, but warm. Emily picked up her fork, twirling pasta before taking a bite. Not bad, she murmured. I assumed men like you only order from 5-star restaurants. Nathan lifted a brow. I learned to cook while working under my father. Sometimes knowing how to make a decent meal keeps you alive better than a gun. Emily laughed softly, the sound light and unexpected after so many hours of tension. The laugh made Nathan still for a moment, something unguarded flickering across his eyes before he looked down. When their plates were nearly empty, Emily rested her hand on the table and looked at him. You say you're not good, not perfect, even dangerous, but you treat me like I'm the only thing worth protecting. Nathan rose, walked around the table, and came to her side. Because you are, Emily. You're the one thing I am willing to change for. She lifted her head, their eyes meeting without shields for the first time. She stood, and the distance between them shrank to a breath. Nathan raised his hand, this time not stopping halfway. His fingers brushed, a strand of hair from her face, lingering against her cheek. If I kiss you right now, will you push me away? Emily didn't answer. She simply closed her eyes, a movement so small anyone else might have missed it. But Nathan didn't. He leaned in, and when their lips met, the world fell into a stillness that felt like truth. The kiss was not rushed, not claiming, not demanding. It was a promise made without words, a warm hand at the small of her back, a quiet spark blooming where fear had lived for too long. When they parted, only inches separating them, Emily kept her eyes closed as she whispered, I don't know if this is right or wrong. Nathan's voice brushed her skin, low and warm, sending a shiver through her. You don't need to know, you just need to feel. And she knew, in that breath of a moment, that whatever darkness surrounded him, the kiss was real. The feeling was real. And Nathan Cross, with all his shadows, was the first person in years who made her dare to imagine a safer world. A world called standing beside him. Many hours after the dinner and the kiss that had tilted Emily's entire world off its axis, Nathan sat alone in his office, the glow from the computer screen casting sharp light across his face, highlighting the stern planes of his features and the dangerous stillness always lurking beneath his calm exterior. He had just heard Emily's footsteps retreat toward her room, soft and deliberate, as if she were still lost in the storm of emotions and moral conflict swirling inside her. He knew she would need time, but time was the one thing he could not afford to waste, not when there were men out there calculating every passing hour, preparing to turn Lisa into collateral. Nathan opened a new report, sent by his underground financial team less than an hour earlier. The content was brief, but each line cut through his defenses like the edge of a blade. 1 week ago, Brian Whitman had carried out a series of small transactions, wiring money into 3 anonymous accounts. Those accounts led directly to a human trafficking group operating on the outskirts of Detroit, where trading people was treated like buying unregistered objects. Nathan clenched his jaw and opened an image of a decoded message exchange between Brian and a contact going by the name Wolf. Your wife looks good. If you don't gather the money in 2 weeks, I'll take the goods. I'll deliver at the old industrial zone. You just transfer the cash. Is the merchandise intact? More than intact. Guaranteed. Nathan felt heat rising in his throat, his chest tightening as though a slab of stone had been dropped onto it. He had seen horrors in his life, but watching a man attempt to sell his wife like a commodity ignited a fury he held back only through sheer discipline. Wolf was a name Nathan knew well, a notorious trafficker, ruthless and elusive, a man whose tracks no one had successfully traced. The fact that Brian dared contact him showed the depth of his desperation and the recklessness that came with it. Nathan scrolled down through the report. A recorded audio clip extracted from Brian's phone, thanks to a tracking device Nathan's men had planted the night Brian infiltrated. The building began to play. Brian's voice, hoarse from alcohol and rage, filled the room. She doesn't listen, doesn't know her place. Better to sell her and clear the debt. She's nothing but another burden anyway. Nathan's hand closed so tightly that the joints turned white. A deep, frozen anger slid down his spine, accompanied by another feeling cold, sharp, and unmistakably decisive. A choice had been made. He stood, pushed his chair back, and dialed a number. Nikolai picked up after a single ring. "Boss? I want every file on Brian Whitman. Bank accounts, credit cards, assets, anything he could use to run. Already checked. He has almost nothing left. The house is mortgaged. The car's in his father's name. One credit card with barely anything on it. He's truly desperate. He arranged to sell Lisa. Not a question, an acknowledgement." On the other end, Nikolai was silent for a moment. "I know, boss." Nathan closed his eyes, inhaling slowly. "I want the time and location of the exchange. Sometime this weekend. At an abandoned warehouse in the Eastern Industrial Zone, but Wolf might change it." Nathan opened his eyes, their focus narrowing like a blade being honed. "I want Wolf stopped the moment he steps into the city. Don't touch his men, just make sure he understands Lisa Whitman is no longer part of the market." "Yes, boss. And Brian? How do you want him handled?" Nathan looked out the glass window. The night was ink black, broken only by faint lights reflecting off beads of dew in the backyard. "I want him gone from Minneapolis. If he refuses to leave..." Nathan's voice dropped into a register that made the air in the room seem to thicken. "If he refuses, I'll send him to the same place he planned to send Lisa." Silence on the line, silence that meant agreement. Nathan ended the call and leaned his head back for a few seconds. He had known many cruel men, but some forms of cruelty were beyond forgiveness, especially when the victim was the young woman trembling in the room across from Emily Carter, the woman who, despite everything he tried to deny, had been pulling his guarded heart toward her from the very first moment he saw her, and because of that, he knew one thing with absolute certainty: he would not let anyone touch either of them, not even in thought. If the world required blood in exchange for their safety, then that was a price Nathan was willing to pay, without hesitation, without regret. This week, everything would end on his terms. Sitting behind the darkened windows of the black car, the night outside folding into Nathan Cross's state of mind, the vehicle slipped past the final red light and moved into the Riverside Industrial Zone of southern St. Paul, where old factories had long since shut down, leaving behind rusting walls and dim lights that flickered like reflections from a pit. He sat upright, hands steady on the steering wheel, eyes distant with the weight of the coming transaction. When the car stopped before a medium-sized warehouse and the metal doors slid open, two enormous guards in black stood on either side, their eyes sharp with suspicion. Nathan stepped out, adjusting the lapel of his tailored black blazer with the unhurried precision of a businessman arriving for an important negotiation. Inside, a concrete table sat beneath a single overhead lamp, casting an oblique beam across the room. Opposite him waited the man Nathan had come to meet, Dmitry Koff, a minor kingpin in the Detroit underworld, infamous for quick threats and a silent, unnerving reach. Dmitry sat with several documents and a thick leather case before him. They exchanged no pleasantries. Nathan broke the silence first. 300,000. And an additional 50,000 for your convenience. His tone was even unadorned. Dmitry shook his head, eyes probing. "You turn money into such poetic statements. Why should I accept?" Nathan opened the case, drew out stacks of cash, and placed them on the table. The bills snapped audibly as they fell, the sound stark in the cavernous room. "Because she won't sell. That woman, Lisa Whitman, is not your merchandise. You're not taking her. You're taking space. You're taking the privilege of stepping aside," Dmitry snorted, nudging a crystal glass away. "You're paying me to walk away. But if I wanted to, I could still take her. And this money might just be bait." Nathan slowly took the seat opposite him, every movement deliberate. "If you could take her, I wouldn't be sitting here." His gaze was icy. "You have two choices. Take the money and withdraw, or take the money and understand that from this moment forward, Lisa belongs to me. Not for business, for her life. And if you or anyone under you touches her or Dr. Emily Carter, the woman protecting her, I will make sure you wake up in a hospital bed wondering why both your legs are gone." Silence stretched. Dmitry looked at the money, then at Nathan. Slower this time. "You play boldly," he murmured. "But tell me why protect her?" Nathan answered softly, almost gently. "Because she is not something to be sold. Dmitri smirked. A lovely ideal. But in our world, ideals die faster than people. Nathan leaned forward, gathering the stacks and placing them back in the case. I'm not protecting her for an ideal. I'm protecting her because I don't want a man like you touching a woman like her. The words were simple but sharper than any weapon. Dmitri tapped a finger on the table. Then I'll take the offer. But you'll accept my condition. Nathan's expression did not shift. Name it. Dmitri slid a paper forward, pen ready. You stop Brian Whitman from leaving the city for the next 48 hours. If he disappears, I'll consider this deal broken. Nathan raised an eyebrow. Brian is going nowhere. You've already lost control. And from now on, my orders are final. Dmitri met his gaze. After we sign, if I choose, I can still find another way to take her. And you know that. Nathan tilted his head. I do. But if you try, you'll learn I don't just spend my own money. Dmitri chuckled bitterly and signed. Nathan stood, waved for his guard, and walked out without looking back. When he stepped into the car again under the faint drizzle, he felt a strange heaviness in his chest, not victory, but responsibility. He knew the agreement he had just sealed was more than protection for Lisa Whitman, or a line drawn against Dmitri Koff. It was a declaration. He would not allow anyone to touch the woman he had, already, silently and irrevocably, begun to give a piece of his heart to. And he knew that with the chaos ahead, that alone was enough to begin a war he had never wanted but one he was now bound to fight. Only 36 hours after meeting Dmitri Koff, Nathan received the first sign that the Mafia had no intention of letting matters end as smoothly as the signed contract suggested. One of his unmarked patrol vehicles reported movement near the Haven. A drone entering the perimeter had been disabled within minutes. Everything had been handled cleanly, but Nathan understood immediately this was no coincidence. It was a warning, or more precisely, a test to see whether he truly intended to stand his ground. That night, he did not sleep. Instead, he assembled his core team, raised all security protocols around the estate, reinforced entrances and emergency exits, and placed 2 guards near Emily's and Lisa's rooms at all times. Near dawn, another encrypted message arrived from a Divida's familiar yet nameless source. Cross, it seems you believe a name and a few suitcases of cash can close every door. Nathan read it without a flicker of emotion. He replied with a single line. I'm not closing doors. I'm rebuilding the entire house. That afternoon, a license plate-less Bentley appeared before a luxury hotel in downtown Minneapolis. Nathan stepped out, adjusted his shirt cuff, nodded to his driver, and walked into the lobby. The top floor had been rented entirely by Dmitri as a temporary base, but today, rather than meeting him, Nathan was escorted to another room, one where 3 other men waited. He knew each of them well. Arkady Petrov, head of an Eastern weapons smuggling network. Leo Martelli, representing an Italian mafia branch once strong in Chicago. And Roman Velez, the man who controlled narcotics distribution across northern Detroit. They watched him with mingled curiosity and disdain. Leo spoke first, his thick Italian accent soft but edged like a blade. Nathan Cross, long time. We're not here for nostalgia. Arkady smirked. You put Dmitri in an uncomfortable position. Cost him face. Roman leaned back, propping his boots on the table, voice dripping with mockery. He even signed a contract. Embarrassing. Why pay when you hold all the cards? Nathan's expression did not shift. He met Roman's gaze with cold precision. Because the exchange was set for tonight, I paid cash to stop the clock and get her out of harm's way immediately. That was triage. Nathan tapped the table slowly. But I know money only buys temporary silence in this city. I'm not here for temporary. He pulled out a folder and slid it across the table. This is for permanent prevention. This is audio, photos, and data proving Brian Whitman used your names to make false deals, borrow money, and fabricate a human transfer document under Roman Velez's authority. If I release this, or worse, if the FBI accidentally discovers it, you'll all be dragged into a federal investigation none of you want. The room went still. Their eyes sharpened, pride giving way to calculation. Nathan continued, steady and unwavering. I don't want a war. I don't need your world. I want Lisa Whitman left alone. She is not a debt. She is not merchandise. She is a human being. Arkady leaned forward. And if someone still tries to touch her? Nathan raised his head, meeting his gaze directly. Then I won't send the evidence. I'll send men. Roman lowered his feet to the floor slowly. The cross name still carries weight. But this is the first time I've seen you challenge an entire table. Nathan stood. I'm not challenging. I'm drawing a boundary. And if you're smart, you'll respect it. Silence pressed in. Then Leo nodded once. Fine. She's off the list. But next time, don't make us gather over a woman. Nathan walked out without a word. But when the door closed behind him, the three men remained quiet, not from anger, but because for the first time in many years, they had encountered a man who was neither boss nor mafia, yet made all three wonder if reputation could truly be more dangerous than violence. And with Nathan Cross, the answer was already clear. Emily stepped into Nathan's office at the Haven after receiving Nikolai's message that all negotiations with Dmitry Koff had been completed and that Brian Whitman had been fully confined within the boundaries Nathan's men now controlled. The door closed softly behind her, and the faint sound of her footsteps on the wooden floor felt like a reminder of the heavy silence waiting in the room. Nathan sat at his desk, his gaze still fixed on the dark computer screen, but when he heard someone enter, he turned toward her. There was no surprise in his eyes, only something that looked like quiet expectation. Emily reached for the back of a chair, leaning into it for support, as though she meant to sit but couldn't quite commit to the motion. I heard, she whispered, her voice sounding as if it had wandered away from her. Nathan nodded slightly. I knew you would. Emily glanced around the room, taking in the papers, files, financial records, and the photographs from the night Brian broke into the building neatly stacked beside the computer tower. Her heartbeat quickened, as if someone had clamped an invisible vice around her ribs. What did you do? She asked. Nathan was silent for a beat before rising and walking toward her. I protected you and Lisa, he said. I removed the greatest threat. Emily closed her eyes and drew in a deep breath. You made deals with the mafia. You used money and threats. She couldn't finish. That's wrong. I can't stand here and pretend it's right. Her voice trembled, but the conviction in it was unmistakable. Nathan lowered his head slightly as he met her gaze. Do you think I don't know that? I know better than anyone. I live in a world where what's right gets tossed aside like paper scraps. I chose another way. Emily opened her eyes again, and a tear slipped down her cheek. But I live in a world where the law is supposed to protect us. I believe in principles. I want to live by them. So how am I supposed to be grateful to you and yet horrified by the methods you used? Nathan said nothing for a long moment, as though fully accepting her contradiction. You'll have to accept that protection doesn't always come from something pure. Sometimes it comes from the very thing people avoid. Emily studied him, searching his face for answers, for truth, for something solid to hold on to. Something inside her felt as though it were melting and freezing all at once. I don't want to depend on anyone, she said softly. I don't want to thank someone who makes me feel like I'm losing the ground under my own feet. I don't want you dependent, Nathan replied instantly. I want you free. But to be free, sometimes you have to be shielded first. I shielded you. And the rest is your choice. She turned her face away, looking toward the window where a pale strip of light filtered through the curtains. I feel like I've lost control, she admitted quietly. You control everything. I don't know where you come from. I don't know what you do, and I have no idea what the future looks like. Nathan stepped closer and placed a hand gently on her shoulder. I'm not asking you to surrender control, he said. I'm asking you to trust just once that I will stand between you and that darkness, and if you choose to step away from it, you can. Emily turned back to him, her chest rising and falling in uneven breaths. How do I know you won't become something else? Something I'll have to run from all over again? Nathan held her gaze without flinching. I can't promise I'll never change, but I can promise I won't change because of the world. I won't change because of anyone else. If I change, it will be because of you. She didn't speak. Instead, she stepped closer, her hand brushing lightly against his. Thank you, she whispered. For everything. Nathan said nothing, only pulled her into a brief but heavy embrace, an embrace that felt like a man standing alone in the ashes, holding just enough flame to keep someone else from burning. Emily lifted her head, her eyes meeting his, and in that fleeting moment, she didn't need him to say anything at all. She understood he had chosen her, and she had allowed herself to choose him, even if the road ahead was shadowed and uncertain, At least she was no longer walking it alone. That morning, soft sunlight poured through the tall windows of the haven, washing the wooden floors in a warm golden glow and filling the space with an almost otherworldly stillness. Lisa sat at the long communal table, her fingers trembling slightly as she held a pen above the neatly prepared stack of documents. The simple cotton clothes she wore no longer framed bruises, and though her long hair fell over her shoulders, softening the fragility of her frame, there was something unmistakably different in her eyes, a clarity, a resolve she had not shown since the day she arrived. Emily stood behind her quietly, offering presence rather than guidance, a steady anchor in the room. Nathan entered with an unhurried stride, carrying a thick envelope in one hand and a bundle of legally stamped documents in the other. He set the envelope before Lisa and took the seat across from her. "Everything is finalized," he said. "The court will review it in 2 weeks. But with your signature today, Brian will no longer have any rights over you. No legal rights, no financial claims, no claim on your life." Lisa looked up at him, her eyes a mixture of fear, gratitude, and something deeper, an uncertainty about herself. "I used to think I could never leave him. Not because I loved him, I didn't, but because I believed no one else would ever accept someone like me, someone weak. Someone who let things go on for so long." Emily moved to sit beside her, taking Lisa's trembling hand in both of hers. "Staying doesn't mean you were wrong," Emily said softly. "Staying means someone made you believe you didn't deserve to walk away." Lisa looked from Emily to Nathan again, her voice barely audible. "Are you sure he won't come back?" Nathan nodded, his voice steady as stone. "Brian is being tracked every hour. He's been removed from the city, and every financial link he had has been severed. If he returns, he will have nothing except a pair of empty hands and a criminal charge waiting." Lisa inhaled deeply, then finally lowered her gaze to the documents. Slowly, deliberately, she signed her name. Each stroke of the pen seemed to sever another invisible chain that had bound her for so many years. When the 45 final signature dried, Lisa set the pen down and closed her eyes. The room grew utterly still. Emily placed a hand on her shoulder, her voice barely above a whisper. "You just chose yourself again." Nathan rose, collected the documents, slid them into his case, and turned toward the door. But Lisa called out softly, "Nathan?" He paused. She met his gaze with a fragile, earnest expression. "Why did you help me? You didn't owe me anything." Nathan studied her for a moment before answering, his voice low and honest, almost unbearably so. "Because you deserve to be saved. No conditions, no explanations. And because men like me have spent too many years being the reason women like you are afraid. It's time to change that." Tears slipped down Lisa's cheeks, not the violent, shaking kind, but soft tears that felt like cleansing rain. When Nathan stepped away, Emily stayed behind, pulling Lisa into a long embrace. No further words were needed. Later that same day, Nathan sent a copy of the divorce documents to his private attorney in Chicago with instructions to monitor the witness protection process. He also created an anonymous trust under the name Lisa Hartman, enough money for her to begin again in any city she chose. He didn't tell her. Instead, he left a small envelope on Emily's desk with a handwritten note, "For when she's ready." In the strangely peaceful order of the corrupt world he had lived in for so long, this was the first time Nathan felt he wasn't just fixing someone else's damage, he was repairing a part of himself. And Lisa, a woman carrying more scars than she ever admitted aloud, became proof that sometimes beginning again isn't a sprint, it is a signature, a decision, a quiet belief that life can still move forward. And now, for the first time, she had all of that. That afternoon, after the car carrying Lisa disappeared down the long driveway to take her to her new temporary home, the vastness of the estate seemed finally to settle into a silence that felt both comforting and unsteady. Emily did not return to her room right away. Instead, she brewed 2 cups of hot coffee and brought them into the living room, where the last warm rays of the day streamed through the tall glass windows, casting long amber streaks across the dark oak floor. Nathan stood there, his shoulder leaning against the frame, his usually cold gray eyes shadowed by a weariness she rarely saw. He stared out into the garden, where the lavender bushes drooped slightly under the weight of last night's rain, as though he were releasing the final, invisible burden of a man who had just finished a brutal vow to protect. "What are you thinking about?" Emily stepped closer, setting the cup on the low table before standing beside him, her voice soft but steady enough to pull him back to the present. Nathan turned to her, looking at her for a long moment before speaking. "I'm thinking about boundaries, Emily. I just used the darkness to buy back the light for Lisa. And I keep wondering whether a man like me could ever truly deserve to step into that light himself." His words tightened something deep in Emily's chest. She understood the loneliness inside that confession. She guided him toward the sofa and pulled him down beside her, unafraid to take his calloused, roughened hand into hers, the same hand that had once held weapons and thrown punches, yet had also tended the tender fractures of her spirit over the past few days. "You told me about your father once," she said, her fingertips gently brushing the faint scar across the back of his hand. "About how you had to grow up too soon, but you've never told me what you actually want. Not Nathan Cross, the man who runs this place. I mean Nathan, the man sitting in front of me right now." Nathan fell silent for a moment, the ticking of the wall clock filling the space between them, before he began speaking in a voice low and resonant, like the deep timbre of a cello. He told her about his years in Chicago, the frustration of watching justice bend endlessly under the weight of money, and the reason he built the Haven not to imprison, but to create a new kind of order where he could protect what the law repeatedly failed to safeguard. "I learned that to keep other people safe, sometimes you have to become the monster they fear," he said at last, his gaze cutting into hers. "That's my world, Emily. A world with no pure white anywhere. And I'm afraid someday you'll look at me and want to run." Emily smiled, soft but unwavering, leaning forward to place a gentle kiss on his forehead, right between the creases of worry that never seemed to fade. "I'm a doctor, Nathan. I face blood, wounds, and death every day. I'm not looking for a sterile world. I'm looking for one where life is valued." She squeezed his hand. "You're not a monster. You're the one who stands guard in the dark. And if you're afraid I'll get lost in that world, then hold on to me tighter." Her words shattered the final wall Nathan had been holding upright inside himself. He rose and led her out to the wide balcony where the night wind swept in with force, carrying the breath of Minneapolis glowing brilliantly below them. Against that sweeping backdrop, Nathan stopped. He didn't kneel. Their life was not a movie, and he knew it. It was real, raw, flawed, marked by scars that did not disappear when the sun came up. He pulled a small, jet-black velvet box from his vest pocket, set it on the cold stone railing, and opened it. Inside lay a simple platinum ring, no grand diamond flaunting itself, only a small, clear stone that caught the city lights and reflected them back like a guiding star. "Emily Carter," he said, his voice low but steadier than any command he had ever given. "I can't promise you a peaceful life. There will always be men like Brian Whitman, men like Dimitri, cough, but I can promise you this. Whenever you look over your shoulder, I will be there. I will be the shield between you and danger, and the place where you can lay your strength down and be vulnerable when you need to." He looked deeply into her eyes, waiting. "I don't need you to save my soul. I just need you to walk this road with me. Will you be my wife, my partner, the anchor that keeps me grounded?" The wind blew through Emily's hair, but she felt no cold at all. The warmth in Nathan's eyes wrapped around her like a shelter. She nodded, tears of joy spilling freely. "Yes, Nathan. I choose you. Not because you saved Lisa, not because you're strong, but because you're the only man who makes me believe that even in the dark, love can still bloom." Nathan slipped the ring onto her finger, then pulled her into a deep, lingering kiss, a kiss carrying the weight of a vow meant for a lifetime. Beneath the vast night sky, two lonely souls who had wandered for far too long finally found each other and began stitching the broken pieces of their lives into something whole. 3 months later, autumn had truly arrived in the city, brushing the air with cool winds and turning the trees into brilliant shades of red. Life did not pause at the happy ending of a chapter. It continued with the quiet, meaningful rhythms of everyday existence. Lisa, now confident enough to introduce herself as Lisa Hartman, was rebuilding her life in a small ground-floor apartment on the outskirts of town, about 20 minutes from the Haven. The windows faced a row of old oaks that swayed gently in the breeze. She had enrolled in school again, choosing to study social work, the dream she once held before marrying Brian. Every morning, Lisa rose early, brewed her own coffee, and walked to the bus stop. She still flinched at the sound of a loud horn, still woke on some nights from the old nightmares that clawed their way back into her sleep. But she was no longer afraid. She knew she wasn't alone. Because every Tuesday and Thursday evening, when Lisa returned home late from class, a familiar gray SUV sat quietly at the corner across from her apartment. The person inside never stepped out. The tinted windows stayed closed. The vehicle remained there for exactly 15 minutes, just long enough to see the lights in Lisa's apartment switch on and the curtains drawn safely before it rolled away into the night. Nathan had never spoken to Lisa about it, and she had never asked. It was a silent promise from a protector, almost like an older brother, that she would never be abandoned again. Meanwhile, at the Haven, the cold, fortress-like atmosphere had softened into the warmth of a real home. Emily continued her medical work, but she had moved her practice from the 4th floor to a spacious, renovated suite on the ground floor of Nathan's building. It was more accessible for her patients, and though he never said it aloud, it allowed Nathan's security team to keep a watchful eye without being intrusive. On quiet Sunday afternoons, they often spent time together on the 3rd floor balcony. Nathan had changed. He was still the powerful man, feared and respected by the underworld. But at home, he set aside the rigid suits and wore the soft sweaters Emily picked out for him. That day was no different. The gentle sound of classic jazz drifted from the old turntable, the melody of La Vie en Rose floating through the air. Emily rested her head on Nathan's shoulder as they watched the sunset wash the city in shades of lavender, the distant river glowing under the fading light. "Are you happy?" Nathan asked suddenly, his hand tightening around hers, the ring catching the last spark of day. Emily looked up at him, her smile glowing brighter than the evening sky. "Happiness isn't the absence of storms, Nathan. Happiness is knowing you have a place to return to when the storm comes. And you are that place for me." Nathan lowered his head and kissed her forehead. "Thank you for being brave enough to walk into my life, for turning this place into a home." They stood there, wrapped in each other, swaying to a slow, unmeasured dance, guided only by the beating of 2 hearts that had grown into one. Their story had begun with violence and fear, yet it ended with healing and hope. Nathan, Emily, and Lisa, 3 souls wounded in different ways, had each found their own path forward. They had proven that no matter how heavy the darkness may be, a single, small flame of trust and compassion can light an entire life again. The love story between Nathan and Emily did not begin with a romantic date or a candlelit dinner. It began with fear, with bruises on a young woman's body, with the wary eyes of a doctor who no longer believed in anything beyond logic, and with the silent remorse of a man who had spent too long living in the shadows. They were not perfect, but they chose to love each other with honesty, with protection, and with the daily act of lifting one another up. And perhaps that is the most genuine kind of love. Through this story, we hope you can feel the true value of trust, protection, and healing in a world that can sometimes be too cold for people to show their hearts. What did this story make you feel? Did it remind you of someone in your own life? What part touched you the most? Please share your thoughts in the comments so we can hear what your heart has to say. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to our channel, like the video, and share it to spread more messages of humanity and hope. Our channel strives to bring you touching, meaningful, and inspiring stories every day. Thank you for staying with us until the end. We wish you good health, a peaceful life, and a heart always full of hope. Goodbye, and see you in the next video.